Fauci himself or a NASA scientist or whatever, everybody that I've ever met that is in the sciences is someone who can also fall victim to imposter syndrome.
Please give us a brief overview. What is a science communication professional? What do they do on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so basically anything in the news right now, it feels like almost NASA, what NASA's doing, climate change, vaccines, health, all of that has to come from a science communicator. And I think the importance of having someone who's a science communications professional versus someone who's versed in like getting the word out there about a product or a company is that we do have most of the time a little bit of a science background ourselves. So we're able to put ourselves in the position of like, hey, when I learned this for the first time, how did it go for me? How can I frame it in a way that the everyday person who has kids to feed and dinner to get on the table and probably 2 or 3 jobs at this point in history to understand what it is that we're saying and how it directly impacts them. So basically, the way I phrased it when I first got into this field is marketing, but for science.
All right. So you did have a previous career though before. So you were a dolphin trainer. Yes.
Yes.
So I already think I'd love to have you back on for that. But why did you change from that? How did you end up moving into science communication?
It was one of the like hardest decisions I ever had to make where the job was so fun and I'm not the type that sits easily behind a desk all day. I like to be out and about and talking to people and on my feet. And I really actually like the physical aspects of the job. And like you said, we can get into that on another day. And at the same time, I was interacting with people every day, hundreds of people every day, sometimes thousands of people every day, depending on how busy we were. And I was starting to see these patterns where, wow, science really needs some help because folks are coming in, people that on the surface, they look like normal everyday people, and they're coming up and asking me questions like, are those real? Talking about the dolphins, and again, I have so many stories for you. Another episode has to happen, but also, I would watch faces just glaze over when I would start talking about climate change, or I would start talking about the changes that we're seeing in the ocean, especially. Or I used to work with parrots as well, and I'd have this big, beautiful talking rainbow macaw on my hand, and they'd be locked in. They're like, "What is it going to do next? Like, what is it going to say? Whatever." And then the second I brought up the rainforest, just the like 1,000-yard stare, and then they would wander off because you're probably the same generation that like we got browbeaten, like the rainforest is getting cut down and it's all your fault somehow, and like all this.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, we have to do something about the climate denial. We have to do something about, this was in 2015, so it was really before vaccine um skepticism was like at a level that it is now, I'll say.
Hmm.
And little did I know, a few years later after graduating with my master's in science communications, we'd get thrown into a historic pandemic, and I would get to watch front row as our government agencies completely fumbled the communications ball in terms of like, hey, you don't need masks. It's cool. Just kidding. You need masks. Oh, masks are sold out now because we panicked everyone, So, it was like I guess like that everyday person interaction is the biggest reason. I was like, I love talking. I love taking care of the animals and interacting with them and all the aspects of the job. I didn't like getting paid $13.50 an hour with a 4-year degree and 8 years of experience. But again, another podcast. But I
Do you think
knew,
that they take advantage of
oh,
workers
yes.
because they want to work with the dolphins and such?
Oh, yes. And if your listeners are not watching, my face is full of of spite right now. But yeah, I keep saying that one day when I get my ducks in a row, I'm gonna write a tell-all like expose book about like the only animals mistreated in the zoo and aquaria field is women because of the
Or the
guilt
human
factor,
animals?
because of the guilt factor, because of the like, well, if you don't, if you want to get paid more, there's like 12 other dumb blonde girls with ponytails that'll line up to train dolphins for free if they want, so
Yeah.
anyway. But to answer your question, yeah, that interaction with like whether it was an inner city kid that was there on a field trip and didn't realize that they lived 4 blocks from the water, because that's a real thing. Or it was a congressperson that was there on a VIP tour, like talking and interacting with people at different levels and adapting my style to who I was talking to and what the goal of the conversation was. That was really what I found my kind of, and I don't know, just I lit up about, and I saw how much it was needed in the kind of zeitgeist and in the media zeitgeist is especially at the aquarium. And this is not a knock at all on anyone that worked at the aquarium at that time. I knew our communications folks were like they had communications degrees. They didn't have any science training, and this was at a time when the Netflix heavy air quotes documentary called Blackfish came out, and it was about SeaWorld and the trainer who had been killed, who, because that field is so small, I did not know her, but I worked with people who knew her. And I worked with people or who worked with some of the folks that were interviewed on that documentary. So knowing firsthand that, okay, the guy interviewed on that documentary was fired from SeaWorld because he kicked an otter, and we're taking his word
Hmm.
on what inhumane treatment of animals is. And um again, this is a long time ago, and again, I never worked at SeaWorld, I want to make that clear, but seeing our own institution, who should have been sticking up for us, kind of cave to this misinformed public pressure of this is cruelty, so that when I'm out on the floor answering questions, someone could come up to me and tell me that what I'm doing is cruel and I'm a bad person. And there was no one there to stick up for me, to defend me. There were no statements made by the institution to say, hey, these are our standards for animal care. This was well before we could do any social media ourselves. Now it's kind of encouraged for zookeepers and animal trainers to say, like, hey, this is what we're doing behind the scenes today. This is how we keep their enclosures clean. This is the lengths we go to make sure these animals live amazing lives. And that just wasn't a thing at the time. And so it was very much a feeling of being abandoned. Like, you're supposed to be here on blizzards and hurricanes and during social unrest and weekends and holidays, and we're going to pay you peanuts. But if people say you're doing a bad job and that you're a bad person, we're just gonna let that
Yeah.
happen. We're actually gonna They put a 4-page feature in National Geographic about how our dolphins, specifically the writer, had gotten to do a behind the scenes tour with us. And we didn't know who she was. We didn't know what she was there for. It was a snow day, so we were supposed to be getting out of there early because it was unsafe to be on the roads. And here comes the CEO with this person. Give her the whole thing. She does the interaction. She gets to feed the animals, talk to the animals, like, do different behaviors with them. And a few months later, surprise, 4-page spread in
Hit
National
piece.
Geographic about how terrible it is with our dolphins in the picture and our
Oh,
facilities in the pictures. So it was traumatic, is like sounds like a extreme term for it, but it was. So that was a really long answer to your question, but yeah, that
it's
was the
okay. I love.
the catalyst. So
No, I love that you're giving long answers. I think the the details are what matters, and I appreciate that. But I feel like we did have a lack of details because on our first when I first asked you, like, what do you do?
mhm.
You went from the dolphin thing and you became a science communication professional. I still am a little not sure. So what is like a day to day thing? So you go in. What time are you going in? What happens? Someone say, hey, go do, like, what's going down up there?
I love this question. Like, so one of the reasons that I love this job is that it's kind of different depending on what I have going on. The best day for me, like I am doing what I went to school for, like get out of bed in the morning because it's like, a full agenda. Are the days that I get to sit behind a camera and ask questions of scientists who are on camera in those, like, we call them talking heads videos, where they have the like space behind them or whatever, and they're talking to the camera. It's me that's sitting behind the camera that they're talking to, which is so cool. And I think, like, not just because, like, oh, I'm making a video and I can share this with my friends and tell them I worked on it, but it's because scientists, again, and I understand where they're coming from because of the story I just told you, are like, oh my god, a camera, this is not my everyday, like, there's a green screen, like, what the heck, there's like microphone, like, what are you gonna say, like, what are you gonna splice out and use against me, like, how is this gonna affect me? And so my job the part of my job that I take the most seriously and that I enjoy the most is putting them at ease and being like, "Hey, here's a little snippet of my background. Here's what we're out to accomplish today. Here's the mindset I want you to take. Take your time. Uh, you don't have to, please don't memorize answers because then you do sound like a robot. Like pretend you're talking to your grandma. Pretend you're talking to, um, a kid. Not usually not them as a kid because that's like the kid Sheldon scenario probably. Like just pretend you're talking to a normal everyday kid, and seeing that pressure that they're putting on themselves kind of melt away as the interview goes on. That is like the that is it right there. That's again what I mean when I say like, oh, this is what I went to school for. But most days, I usually log on here at my house at around 7 a.m. because I do a 4:10 schedule. And I get like the emails, the to-do list for the day set up. I go into the office around, usually try to be there around 9. It's like a 20-minute drive for me against California Bay Area traffic. So yay me.
Okay.
And then when I'm there, it's, probably some amount of meetings on projects. And my projects, I'm really lucky. I'm in a place at the institution where like I can help almost everybody with something. It's almost like a freelance position, but I still get benefits. Yay! And so I could be working on a YouTube script that we're going to film in a day. I could be writing blurbs for a timeline that's going to get printed out and put on the wall of the engineering building for all the visitors that come to do conferences there and things like that. So environmental design. I could be writing web copy to go up on an internal website that's to help employees find resources or do whatever, but I could also be writing for external articles as well. I just wrote one about the laboratories where I work, weld shop. It's a huge, like mile by mile square institution and they have 4 guys on the welding team, and they're doing everything from, like, fabricating the gates that surround certain buildings to, like, helping assemble, a laser that is gonna be used in major experiments. So, like, it's incredible, and doing that kind of article, as well as, you know, helping out with some events. Like we did a women in data science event a couple of years in a row that I got to help out with, and kind of like that marketing. I'm taking pictures for their social media. I'm wandering around and talking to people and getting quotes that might get used in an article about the event. So it like I said, it's really different every day, and I usually sign off for a little bit around the usual time to commute home, 4:30 or 5, and then I might pop back on in the after hours to get, like, some actual writing done when there's nobody pinging me or interrupting me, so so it's different every day. I'm super, super fortunate because I can kind of, um, build my schedule the way it works best for my creative brain, which is amazing, and I think that's, like, a California thing, but I also have, like, one of the best, like, healthiest work environments that I've ever had, so my bosses are really amazing, so again, kind of a
That's
nebulous
awesome.
answer, right? But
No, no, I'm already quite jealous of you because I only know one scientist, and I asked him if he wanted to be on this show. He's a astrophysicist,
wow.
and he's a Russian gentleman. And I said, "Hey, can you be on the show?" And he said, "Shane, no, they will fire me. I am not allowed to talk to you about anything." And I'm like, "Oh, fantastic!" So that was
Yeah,
that.
tell him to
So
put you in contact with some buddies maybe, some less, less spicy
uh,
jobbed buddies, I don't know.
yeah, right. Okay. Um, so this is your path of how you got to being a science communication specialist. How, if someone is watching this right now and they said, "I want to be like Amy," how would they get there? What do you think the easiest, least path of resistance to getting into this type like line of work would be?
Yeah, so I have 2 answers to that. One is, you're maybe you're in a high school, you're in college right now, and to that I'd say you could even finish your degree in whatever it might be in, if it's in chemistry, if it's in if it is in communications. And what I would do is add a minor if you can, add a minor in biology if you're a communications or writing like an English degree, right? Or journalism degree. Add a minor in bio or one of the sciences that you're the most interested in. What gets you to stop scrolling on TikTok, right? Like, is it videos about space? Is it videos about animals? Whatever. Um, or see if your institution that you're interested in has a program. When I was going to grad school, I was looking at grad schools in 2018, 2017, and there were no science communications programs in the United States at that time. The closest one was the closest thing to science communications, probably there. I think Oregon had a program because they have an amazing program now. They have a whole center for science communications. Santa Cruz was the one that I was familiar with. UC Santa Cruz, which I'm still gonna try to find a way to take classes just so I can be a banana slug. That's like a thing on my list. I don't know. I want to be a banana slug because that's their mascot. It's the best mascot ever. And that was $55,000 for one semester and a 2-year master's program. So I said no, thank you, and I went to the UK, where the UK has been doing this kind of thing on purpose since the 80s. But now Cornell University has a program. I believe that Vanderbilt has a program. It's starting with the Ivy League, right? But I think it's definitely matriculating, if you will, down through any other, not down through, but out through more accessible institutions as well. So, but again, major in whatever you're majoring in, get a communications, minor or something like that. And then if you're mid-career and you're doing something that you're like, this isn't it anymore, like I'm not fulfilled anymore, I'm not giving back, that tends to be what the messaging I hear from people. Community colleges are amazing now because people have had to kind of pivot and start using community colleges more because of the price points of four-year universities, and just the amount of stuff that you can access through a community college through even just online programming is pretty incredible. And if you're already someone who's comfortable talking, or you're probably more qualified than you think, especially depending on what kind of job you're in. If you're already doing a lot of interactions with people, because at the end of the day, communications is 100% like just figuring out how to talk to different people. It doesn't matter if you're writing or tweeting or, creating videos or podcasting. It's just figuring out how to talk to your different audiences. That those would be my two different. You don't have to necessarily get a degree, but start, shaping your work experience in a way that's like, hey, can I help out with that newsletter? Or, hey, can I maybe ghostwrite for you, boss? Like, let me try my hand at writing emails or speeches or whatever. See where you can get experience here and there. And yeah, so those are my two kind of, because a lot of people, this is something that a lot of folks will leave the hard sciences to pursue. And so there are 100% ways to do it, and ways that aren't like go back to school full time like I did. So
someone watching this, they might live anywhere. Who are the typical employers who would want someone in this role that you can think of?
this is a super good question. So on my podcast, I actually just interviewed a friend of mine who was a press officer at the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. It was a dream job of hers, and she got laid off at the beginning of the year with all of the huge budget cuts and sweeping changes to all the alphabet agencies, if you will. But I think because of that, it's kind of become a catalyst for private sector and academia to ramp up their communications. So, because we don't have these big agencies and press teams getting us the information that we need about whether it's about medications on the shelf, or it's about, sea level rising, or it's about things that are affecting our everyday that are science, universities and corporations and NGOs, or what are they called? Non-government organizations, not for profit, basically. Um, they are beefing up their communications teams, it seems to me, on the outside, from the outside. And the folks that are still among the government agencies and the government contractors, I'm myself a government contractor technically, we're finding new ways that we can reach expanded audiences. And so I think that's where I would start looking. Like I said, corporations, um, usually associated with health. Like, I think health is probably the biggest employer in terms of the science communications field. Excuse me. There's also,
Does
if you're, go ahead.
does this also um do you have to be really good at social media? Are you kind of like also thrust into that role that, well, you also have to go on Facebook or whatever? Is that part of it?
That's such a good question. So I think in years past you had to, and I'm personally pro social media in that I think you should have a little experience or be familiar with the kind of mechanics and the fact that you can do a lot of what's called social listening through social media. So even if you yourself are not scheduling posts and figuring out all the back end things to make, a post go viral or whatever, understanding what makes a post go viral, understanding what kinds of keywords are being used in the text of a post, or like, oh, Instagram added this feature now so we can do that kind of content. I think that that is a really big bonus. I'm a big proponent of it. Currently right now I'm the only person on my team that has any kind of social media experience, and all the time people are like, every time you post on our team's channel, like I always just stop and read what you have to say, and da 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 da. And it's like, well, this comes from this background of like having to do that, in different roles full time. So yeah, I think that's a really good question too, because 10 years ago, it was very much like, oh, you're young, you understand this crap, you're gonna do social media. And they would pay very little and they would kind of pigeonhole you, and so that is something to look out for, but I don't think it's happening as much. And I think if you can at least have familiarization with what, first of all, the work that it takes, have an appreciation for the amount of work that it takes so that you're yourself not that person later down the road being like, just hire this intern to do the social media, because it really does require professionalism and extensive like understanding of how people move in those spaces and what folks are really paying attention to and listening to. So
Okay. All right. What about the future of science communication? So as a human, so you are in this role, where might you go next? Where might the average person go next? Is there a path upward or forward to anything?
I love this question. You have such good questions. That's
Thank
really
you.
funny because I'm kind of at that place right now where I've been so lucky to have this very steady place to learn and grow and be supported. And now I'm at a place where I'm like, what is next? And where I am, my team, I'm kind of topped out. There's not really much more I can do to move up. I could move laterally in the laboratory. I could go be a communications manager for a specific organization within the laboratory. But if if you're someone else, yeah, look for those places where if you want to be the director because you want to control the narrative, you want to be the communications director and decide what we're talking about, decide what our editorial calendar looks like. What are the different dates that we care about in a year that we want to talk to our audience on? Like if you're in a zoo, you're probably going to care about International Giraffe Day, right? So having that kind of agency to be like, this is what our institution stands for and talks about. That's so much more than social media. That's like you're informing what the director of your institution talks about. You're helping set up the strategy for the institution. What's our mission? What are our goals? What are the different what do we stand for? So there's a lot that goes into being in leadership. I don't know if that's for me. I think I'm probably gonna err more on the end of like, hey, let's try this whole self-employed thing. I'm not there yet. I have a long way to go before I feel comfy about making that decision. It's a big undertaking, but I know because I have the marketing background and I have the communications background. I even like worked in customer service many times and retail and food service. Like I feel very well rounded and equipped to and supported. I have a lot of folks in my family that are self-employed as well to kind of make that jump. And I would love to be like a consultant, somebody that like your friend, the astrophysicist, who's like, this podcast just asked me to talk to them. How do I do that? How do I prepare? What's it going to be like? You can call me and I can kind of give you, oh, here's some talking points. Like, let me see your bio. I'll synthesize it into something that's easy for you to relate on camera rather than going through in 1984 to 1987. I did this because scientists love to tell a from the beginning story. Let me tell you. So yeah, so maybe one day, like working for myself, doing podcasts that I hope help not just scientists but also everyday people appreciate science and the work at all the different areas that goes into making it happen. So
Yeah. All right. If is there anything that you would change about science communication field? if you had the opportunity
How
to?
much time do we have? No, actually, it's a
3
really
hours.
exciting.
We're going for 3
Okay.
hours today.
Okay, good. Strap in, listeners. No, I think actually it's a super exciting time to be in science communications because, like I said, even when it's 6 years ago when I was starting to look for programs, like I said, it wasn't a thing here. That like you could look up on Indeed or whatever science communications. It did not come up. You might get a smattering of different things. You might get like social media manager for local pet rescue, and then you might get like, communications director for Northrop Grumman. Like there was no in between, and things were just they were just not sorted under that terminology. And so I have watched the field explode since then. Like I said, there's so many institutions, there's so many universities now offering this kind of training. My little sister, my stepsister, went to University of Chicago and decided she wanted to take some communications classes, and they liked so much what she put together in terms of the classes list. They were like, "We're going to turn this into a minor. Like this needs to be a thing that our scientist, she's an astrophysicist too. Talk about brainiac, okay? She's just discovering exoplanets and stuff and whatever, That's amazing. But she was like, "Yeah, I wanna learn how to put together a podcast. I wanna learn the basics of video editing. I wanna learn, what's it like to write, a blog." What those kind of skills, and so University of Chicago now offers that, and I think she and we're not the only ones. We've been banging this drum for a while, like, we need to get better at how we talk to people about science. For too long, there's been the ivory tower, if you will, where if you don't have a PhD or letters behind your name, we don't wanna hear from you. You don't matter, right? Like, if you're not using the biggest words possible in your paper, we're not taking you seriously, right? And me
Right.
and the people coming after me, I think especially, are very much like, no, we need to talk to people and meet them where they are, whether that's TikTok and a, eighth grade reading level or what. Like we can't expect folks to make better decisions just by giving them more information, right? Or to understand things just because we're giving them more information. So as much as, I joke about like, "Oh, how much time do you have? There's so much wrong." That I actually think that we're this is one of the one of the places that I feel the country is headed in a really good direction. I think science communications is transcending old methods of media and finding new ways to reach people and find commonality, which I think is super exciting. So it's a really good time to jump on this wave and surf it. So
Do you find that okay, let's talk about regionals. You came from Maryland,
that's right.
rural Maryland, yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I I do you ever go first of all, do you ever go back there? Uh,
Uh, yeah, not
it's
enough, but
okay, so when you go back there, do you feel like the science, skepticism there might be different than what you're dealing with in California, or what do you think about that?
such a cool question. So, yes, you have my bio, so you know that, like, yes, I grew up in a super rural, like, we almost had an empty school on the first day of deer season. Like, that's how rural it was. There are 2 high schools in my whole county, okay? And, but I also spent 15 years in Baltimore City, which is very blue. It's very, you know, diverse in the folks that live there. And
Mhm.
there is
I
so
watched The
much.
Wire.
Yeah, hey, I'm sorry to say that's a documentary and not a, no, I'm just kidding. I love my city, and I love that show did such a good job of pointing out, "Hey, this is going on for real, and we need to talk about it. We need to look at it." And Baltimore, as an aside, has had the lowest crime rate this year that it has had in, like, 30 years or something like that. Don't quote me, but it's amazing. Look it up. Mayor Brandon Scott doing good stuff. But, I think also living here, so people think San Francisco Bay Area, like, oh, it's like super, super lefty, Harvey Milk in the 70s and like the gay and LGBTQ push and movement, this is just as left as it gets geographically and politically, I guess. But I'm an hour and a half, like 45-minute drive from San Francisco. And like I said, the area that my institution is in was just until about 10 years ago known more for its rodeo than for its research. Like I am in arguably the cusp of suburbia to rural here. And so exactly what you're talking about. Yes, absolutely there is that skepticism, there is that distrust of like the institutions that are putting out information about climate change and CDC and all that good stuff. And I think there's that's where my podcast comes in, right? That's where this podcast comes in, is talking to people about what they do every day and who they are and what they find value in, and that's the way we're going to reach them. I think at the end of the day, science communications is going to be 70% of that. Like, how do we talk to them once we have their ear, and how do we make sure that we're getting messages about vaccines, messages about, um, you know, I don't know, West Nile flu or whatever the topic is. How are we getting these, or showing them what the value is in NASA, why we should fund it as taxpayers, right? But
Well,
I think we
well,
go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you since you brought up NASA, and we know that budgets are getting gutted a lot. Not just for NASA but for others. How do you feel about that?
It is devastating to see. I think as a science fan, I think any science fan right now is devastated because NASA is like especially the like end all be all, right? Like every people walking around in your grocery store right now wearing a NASA t-shirt, right? Like that is the pinnacle, I think, of science communications. In the 60s during the Apollo missions, every television was on with a NASA communicator behind the behind the controls,
We
making
still
sure that
have only a few blocks from my house. We still have one of those rocket ships that they built for all the kids, right? So that
yeah,
kids
yeah,
people
space
get into
camp.
it.
Like, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So to see, I think it's hitting a lot of Americans regardless of where they fall on the ballot hard to watch this happen. And same with national parks. National parks are what's near and dear to my heart. I've always been a big national parks fan. I was raised by national parks fans, and to see them on the chopping block and the land up for grabs is devastating. Like, I don't know another term for it, and I hope that Americans can express the importance of this stuff to the folks that are in power right now. And in a way, maybe it's one of those things where it's a silver lining in that people are starting to be like, oh, wait a minute. No, we need this stuff. Like, this is important to us. We grew up going to those campsites. We grew up going to space camp or going to see that rocket ship. And, that's not something that we want to go away. So on a like everyday American kind of standpoint, it's devastating. As a science communications person, I was gunning for national parks jobs. That was my goal. I was working with an HR, um, like, excuse me, an HR veteran from the national park system. She had just retired. She was helping me craft my resume. She was giving me interviewing points, how to navigate usajobs.gov, which is a nightmare of a website. And all of a sudden, the next day, that was gone. Like there's not going to be any new positions really unless they're seasonal. And yeah, so personally it affects me. And then seeing my LinkedIn full of people that I know personally and know they worked their butts off to get those jobs with different agencies, whether it's NASA, whether it's FDA, whether it's NIH, the National Institute of Health, um, putting up their open to work flag on their profile picture and talking about, I don't know what to do next because this was my dream job. So there's so many levels of devastation for me. It's really hard, but as a relentless optimist, I'm kind of hoping that this moment is the metaphor I've been using is you have to pull an arrow back before you can let it go. That is what I'm choosing to believe is happening right now. It has never been more obvious that we need help communicating science and reaching everyday people, and expressing to them why it matters to them at the dinner table, why it matters to them at the gas pump, why it matters to them in the grocery store, not just, hey, we like NASA shirts. So yeah, that's my answer.
Okay, Amy. So you made this mission about meeting people where they're at rather than preaching to the science choir. Can you tell us about a time when you actually reached someone who was skeptical about science or something about science and you changed their mind? And what was that like?
I love that question so much. So, and that's such a huge motivator I know for a lot of people right now. Is like, how do I talk to my uncle at the Thanksgiving table? I know he's going to bring this up, whatever it is. And I'm having trouble coming up with like a specific person and situation. I think at the aquarium when I was a dolphin trainer, when I was working with the animals, I was fortunate in that when you have animals behind you, right, or with you, you get people locked in, right? I what's the word? Captive audience, if you will, right? And so it was really easy for me to create this conversational, relaxed, candid conversation with whether it was a person or a whole 1,500 person auditorium, about topics that again aren't so fun, right? We're not talking about the dolphins slipping around, we're talking about the ocean and plastic pollution or something like that. And I think my best memories of that job was when I would find that one thing, that one factoid, that one way of putting something that they probably heard 100 times in a way that I would watch people's faces in the crowd go, "Oh," and that was just like, "Oh, that's the best," you know? So, back when
Nice.
I was there, it was really the transition, the vilification of plastic bags, right? We had these really flimsy plastic bags in every grocery store, and when I was a kid, it was like, "Paper, plastic, how dare you cut down trees? Plastic is the way to go." And then it turned into this, like, plastic bags are the devil, right? They're terrible, don't use them, and that was met with, like, of course, a lot of pushback, like, "Well, I gotta get my groceries in my car, paper bags break, like, that they're bad for trees, what do you mean?" Like, and, so that was kind of the hill that I decided to die on, for most of my big talks, and the way that I would do it is I would bring one with me up to the microphone, and I would talk about, the dolphins, we'd talk about whatever adaptations or whatever our program was about, and then at the end, I'd be like, "Okay, so now that you've seen these amazing animals and we've talked about their habitat, I wanna talk to you about something that you can do every single day to help dolphins like this out in the wild." And you could see, like, I could almost like feel the like, "We should go, we should leave" kind of happening with the audience. And I would pull this plastic bag out and, I'd kind of say, "Everybody knows what this is, whatever." And I would kind of speak to the fact that, like, hey, it's tough. Things get switched up on you, right? A few years ago, it was worse. It was bad to do paper. And now we're telling you not to do plastic and to bring your own bags. And what I would do is I would talk about how those plastic bags, once they're in the water, because that's where they end up when they get loose and they're stuck in trees and they're whatever else. It's not just that they're gross in the water. I would actually like pull the bag out and make it kind of undulate through the air. I was like, "What does this look like right now?" And the whole audience would be like, "Jellyfish." I'd be like, "Right. You saw the big sea turtle in this exhibit or, in this other exhibit when you came in, right? What did those sea turtles eat?" And everyone, you could just see again the whole auditorium, "Jellyfish." Like, exactly, and those things don't break down once they're in their stomach. They don't know it's not, dinner and whatever. So finding that way of not going straight into it and being combative and being like, "Well, you're a vaccine denier, aren't you? I can just tell. Here's why you're wrong." Like, that is just it's not gonna work. And we've all been there, right? We've all gotten really frustrated and just wanted to like strangle someone and be like, "What are you talking about? Like, this is not real." But being able to find that like super, super, super everyday dumb thing that they have in their house or that they deal with and, relate it to something that gets the point across without an "I told you so," without a gotcha, without a mic drop. Ugh. Like all of these, I rolled my eyes at that because it's like that's how we debate in this country now is the mic drop moment. And, like I said, I wish I could tell you that, "Oh, yeah, my aunt so and so, now she believes in climate change because of one thing I said." But, in that, vein, I guess, finding ways to relate things to what people really genuinely, honestly care about. Because at the end of the day, it usually comes back to some sort of fear. Like fear of my groceries are gonna break in the middle of the parking lot on a rainy day, or, if climate change is real, that's super scary. What am I supposed to do about that? Like I'm just a regular person trying to pay my bills and, get my kids from school every day. And I think as communicators, and especially, like yourself doing podcasting, like being able to relate it back to something that somebody can listen to in their car on their way to work, or that one really relatable thing, and not convince them, not put a period at the end of the sentence, not go home and be like, "Dear diary, today I won the fight about vaccines against so and so," right? No, it's just planting that seed, planting that little seed of like, "Hey, this person who I think is cool and funny and respects me left this idea with me," and hoping that that seed then germinates. So that's kind of my roundabout answer to that question.
Okay. All right, let me ask you this. Because I know this has a personal relation to you, but I always think that air traffic controllers, the best air traffic controllers I probably know, have severe ADHD, and it is undiagnosed.
Yeah, sure,
Okay. Because you cannot be an air traffic controller if you have diagnosed ADHD, which
sure.
is the irony of
Wow.
the situation, because the ones who are undiagnosed that I'm pretty sure I know are actually really good at the job, because
Yeah,
they can be very laser focused on this particular thing they're doing. So there's different types of ADHD, right?
sure.
There's
Mhm.
a sort of a spectrum. I know I know this they're still working on classifying and all that. So what I'd like you to do is just tell us your experience with ADHD personally, and how it's affected your schooling, your career, and what do you think about the whole thing?
Yeah, I love this question, especially right now. And just to be clear, I have no formal training. I can't diagnose anybody, and everything that I talk about, I relate back to my personal experience. And what I want to say first and foremost is that this is not a children's specific condition. It is not. Back when I was a kid, it was all little boys who just can't sit still, and they're the ADHD ones, right? And I was pretty still in class, but my brain was out that door, probably up in the airplanes that you're directing somewhere, and just gone. Just a daydreamer is what I was referred to as a lot as. I was not very good at like school because I couldn't pay attention. My ADHD manifests in that I have a really hard time prioritizing because I'm thinking of too many things at once. I call it a big picture brain. This is what makes me really good at strategy, at the kind of, high level, like, okay, we want to write this tweet, but who are we supposed to be reaching with that tweet? What are the hashtags that are real popular right now? Because what is going on in the world, like continuing to like expand out, right? And so when you have to focus on one math problem, not great, right? Especially math and me, dyscalculia. I just learned how to pronounce that word. Is associated with ADHD, especially for some reason in women, and dyscalculia is dyslexia for numbers. So, a lot of those very specific assignments or problems, like I would have a
Say
lot
the word again. I'm sorry.
dyscalculia. So, I think it's Dysculia, I think. And it's where you switch numbers up. So I can read a number on a screen, like if I'm looking for a customer service number or something, and be looking at the number and still punch it into my phone with 2 or 3 digits switched and reordered and not in the right order. It's super not fun and I hate it. It's made my life really hard in terms of like math classes and budgets and all kinds of things, but
So I've always heard that was dyslexia. Is that not the same thing?
it's the same thing, it's just with numbers. So it's got a different name. So it's dyscalculia.
So,
Dyscalculia.
okay, so dyslexia is when it's letters, and dyscalculia is
Dyscalculia,
numbers.
yeah. I always thought it was
Okay.
dyscalculia, but it's got the IA at the end.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So when I'm yelling at air traffic controllers about being dyslexic, I'm wrong. I
yeah.
should be saying,
Yeah!
"Stop being
Dysca
dyscalculous," or whatever
Yeah,
the play on the word would be. I don't know. I
yeah,
have to
yeah,
look it up.
Dyscalculia, yeah, it sounds like a goddess name or something, like, "Oh, pray to Dyscalculia that you'll pass your math test," I don't know, but but yeah, so, yeah, the way that it manifested for me, it was really hard to detect, and people just thought, like, I was lazy or I wasn't motivated or, "You have so much potential, you just don't add up," whatever, all those things. I was diagnosed when I was 21, and it was because my father had actually just been diagnosed as an adult as well, and I was having symptoms of depression. I was not like the worst kinds of depression, just the super unmotivated, not interested in doing anything from like brushing my teeth to just getting off the couch in a day, just really, really finding it hard to like, oh, I don't know, go to class. I worked through college, so also that's a big problem too. If you have to work to pay for your books, pay for your, schooling, like not being able to motivate yourself is really hard. And so I went for that, thinking like, okay, this runs in my family too. Maybe it's just that. And my doctor, thank goodness, was treating my dad at the same time and was like, nope, actually, it's very likely that you are also ADHD if one of your parents is. And she got me on a medication that is a non-stimulant, believe it or not. A lot of ADHD is associated with like Adderall or whatever, and the one that I'm on is a non-stimulant, and it helps slow my brain down so that I can do things like prioritize tasks. So instead of getting overwhelmed by all the things I have to do today and then shutting down because I don't know where to start, I'm able to be like, okay, this is right in front of me, so I'm going to start on this, and then after that, I'll do this, and then I can kind of get through a list of tasks or a day. And my whole adult life has been figuring out hacks to keep myself motivated. For instance, I meal prep on Sundays, and not just because I used to be a gym rat, but because I know that if I don't on Wednesday evening, am I gonna feel like cooking after work, or am I gonna eat some crackers and a handful of baby carrots and girl dinner, if you will, that was going around for a while? Girl dinner. Eat like a toddler, basically. If I'm left to my own devices, I'm not eating enough vegetables. I keep those uncrustable PB&J sandwiches in the freezer just in case I end up in this situation. But uh, you know, I just can't be bothered. I'm like, I don't want to make the house hot. I'm gonna have to do dishes. I'm not gonna do it. And so, just these little cheat codes and hacks to keep myself focused and able to like function. Basically, routines are super important for me. And so a job where I don't have a lot of structure, like my job now, can be really challenging because you don't have that boss being like, you have to be here at 9, we have a meeting at 10, we have to do this, and then you get this like order of operations job, and then you're done. Dolphin training, animal training was really good for me because there is a lot of structure and a huge, like, very time dependent schedule to work off of. So it has been tough. And as soon as you said like most air traffic controllers are ADHD, I'm gonna be honest with you, I had a wave of relief go over me. That makes me feel so much better. And I know they can't have official diagnoses, and we're not saying that that is the end all be all truth. It's just a feeling that you feel like you have. Like that made me feel better because ADHD, the science says that we evolved as the ones that were keeping track of where the predators were in the weeds. And we were the ones paying attention to the storm clouds. And we were the ones saying, like, that cave looks a little dicey to me. Let's not go there tonight. We had our eyes everywhere at once. And also, could, like you said, hyper focus on things that really matter
Yeah.
too. So that,
Yeah.
I'm not even kidding you. That was like my gut reaction was like, oh, thank God. Because if you're zeroed in
Yeah.
on your radar, like,
Yeah.
I don't know anything about flight control or air traffic control. If you're zeroed in on your radar, but you hear somebody a few banks down on a radio, you're like, wait a minute, that affects me. That's going to affect me in several hundred miles. I want that person more than the person who's zeroed in on just the flights that they are working with, or whatever. I
Yeah.
have no idea how it works. I'm just making
Yeah.
scenarios up,
Yeah.
but
Well,
but yeah,
to be clear, I don't technically know if anybody I've ever worked
right,
with has ever had
exactly,
ADHD. So,
right,
I'm just telling you my thoughts that it's most likely the case, and what I see. And and to piggyback a little on what you're saying there, yeah, when I'm teaching somebody how to do air traffic control where I work, which is the busiest place there is, um, there's a lot of thought as to, okay, this is happening right now, but how does it affect that, or what's happening over there? So kind of a lot of what you're saying is
yeah,
that also getting into the minds of the pilot themselves, the pilots. They're talking to multiple pilots. What do you think that person thinks about what you just said? How do you
mhm,
think that they're internalizing that? What do you think they're going to do about the way you said those numbers versus the way you could say these numbers this way?
mm,
Right. And
yeah,
so there's a lot of all that going
yeah,
on to make someone
absolutely,
to be good at this job. Right.
right,
You can
right,
just spit out the words and
right,
be passable, but with all when it gets to the point where there's so much going on, and that you've got to be really really dialed in.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely.
I've beat that one enough. But so let's talk about influencers who
Mm.
peddle in pseudoscience.
Oh,
So
man.
there's there's some big ones out there. You can name some names if you like.
Yeah, yeah.
But so I know obviously you're trying to fight misinformation. How do you compete with massive platforms, massive names that are saying things that you obviously disagree with? How do you combat against that with your role?
That's such a good question. So I used ChatGPT to help me establish the framework for my podcast and get like a communications plan, get like a messaging pyramid, get all these communications things that you're supposed to have when you start something, right? Like this to reach an audience and have a goal. And I may or may not have prompted ChatGPT with like, I want to be Joe Rogan's worst nightmare in terms of podcasts, right? And so it's hard, it almost feels insurmountable, right? And the answer is there's not going to be a Joe Rogan of reason, of science, right? There's just not. And um I think the way that we're tackling it, and it seems like the direction we're going in is instead of having one know-it-all person, you know, having death by a thousand cuts almost like let's have all these different resources people can go to because that's how science works too. There isn't one authority that, or there shouldn't be. What by the time it gets to the CDC and the CDC says this is what we're doing as a nation. That's because it has to come down to policy, right? It has to come down to something that can be written on a document and preserved in the archives, and companies can then move forward with their drug or not, But the reality is there's a ton of scientists informing that one decision, right? There's a huge pool of experts with different specialties all over the place. So I think that model is how we combat this like one, and not to use he's not the only one, but these fewer but louder voices is to say, sure, but we have 10 podcasts on our side that say that is not the case, whatever the topic might be. So I think it's going to be step by step, and it's going to be little things like you and me, what we're doing, um, uh, getting to know people, like I said, meeting people where they're at, really getting them to trust us as people. And part of that is the accountability to say, hey, I got this wrong. A few episodes ago, I said XYZ. It turns out someone brought to my attention, there's a paper, there's this resource, and this is why I was wrong. And that's science. That science is like, it's science is not a thing, it's a process. And so I think if we can find ways to start making cracks in this, like there's only one authority and it's this podcaster that I or this influencer that I listen to, and show folks that like no, you can listen to that podcaster but you need to listen to three or four other ones that disagree with them. That's how you train your brain. First of all, that's how you come up with decisions and opinions about non-science things too, like voting, politics related topics and whatever. So yeah, I think that's my answer. I think little by little, and it's not a fancy I wish it was a what do you call that? Like a magic pill. But it's going to be the work, but knowing that you're out here with your podcast and I'm doing what I'm doing and there's so many other people that are doing this at the same time, like I said before, I think this could be the start of something really amazing in how we change that narrative of there's this guy on the podcast said this thing and I believe him. And I guess like that's a cool thing to kind of speak to too. Like you and I just started podcasts. You can buy a microphone for $50 on Amazon and say whatever you want and nobody stops you. Like you don't have to. You and I, we have
Currently,
facts currently. True, especially in the last couple of weeks. Yeah. But like you and I, we have our resources next to us while we're recording our podcast, or we're doing our research beforehand. We're double checking. We're going to come on the next episode and say, hey, I got that wrong. That is not how everybody works. And especially like you said, it hasn't been the standard up until this point. So I think one of the reasons that Joe Rogan especially has been so popular is because he can say, "Yeah, no, I got that wrong." Sometimes, and he is very relatable in a lot of ways, but at the same time, again, that conditioning of I can't get my opinions from one person. I have to come up with my own based on listening to a lot of different people. That's what we're going for here.
Yeah. It sounds like your podcast, Blue Collar White Coat, is sort of your own personal little battle with this. You want to tell us about
Yes.
the uh, the
Yeah.
podcast?
Yeah, oh my gosh, I am so excited. It is so much fun. I never looked at podcasting as a hobby before, but now I have such an appreciation for it, and, ultimately, it gets me more opportunities to do exactly what we're doing right now, hanging out with a stranger on the internet and realizing I have so much more in common with them than I realize, right? And, so yeah, Blue Collar White Coat comes from, where I work every day. I get to talk to the folks that are programming the smartest supercomputer on planet Earth. You know, they're or not programming, but they're running data through it and learning about amazing carbon capture and just whatever. And then I'm also talking to folks who keep the lights on over their heads while they're doing this research, right? And bringing to the attention of the whole laboratory the importance of these folks that are out here when we're all working from home because weather is happening or something else is going on. These folks are still going to work. They're there to make sure that those supercomputers are running because all of the water that's being pumped beneath them to keep them cool is able to do that, right? They're whether they're pipe fitters or welders or whatever. And so I saw this kind of this reoccurring theme for what you and I have been talking about in this episode. I saw this pretty big divide in this it's almost like a microcosm of what we've been talking about, right? You have folks that are not in the sciences and might be from a more rural area, might be from like a more kind of just disconnected from science background. And then you have the people that are scientists and they're super deep in it and they can't wrap their brains around people not understanding, but they understand to be true. And the white tower, the ivory tower rather, of, you know, just untouchable science elitism. And that's not to say the scientists that I work with are like that, but you can see kind of where that comes from. Um, Super smart people sometimes have trouble stepping back and seeing that what they're hyper focused on isn't what everybody else is hyper focused on. And that's okay. We need people to be that smart, right? And so I'm watching this dichotomy in real life and I'm watching a little bit of resentment because again, one group got to stay home during the pandemic and work from home and run data from home and write from home. Oh, wow. Best day ever. A cat. This is amazing. I feel
Not
blessed.
allowed in here. Why is
I
she not
feel
in here?
blessed. She's helping. Um, but yeah, you have this. Yeah, I was watching this like real time resentment. I started at this institution right after the lockdowns were kind of winding down, so we were still wearing masks to work, but we were asked to come back a couple days during the week and whatever. And I'm watching this one group of people get zero recognition for the work that they do, zero validation for the fact that they're still at work and everybody else gets to work from home in their pajamas with their cats walking through meetings and stuff like that. And they're still expected to work together and depend on one another's work in order to either have a job at all or to get their work done. And just again, interacting with them one on one to write an article about something or do a video, it's like we're guys, we're all the same. We're all the same. We are not as different as these forces in the world want us to believe we are. And so the idea for the podcast came from like I really got to find ways to get these underappreciated, heard from, I guess, voices out to the world, and especially in a situation where we need more welders. Who do you think puts the spaceship who do you think puts the like James Webb together? It's not going to be, these astrophysicists. It might still be someone that has a PhD or a master's degree, but it's someone who has a background in machining metal and, how metals go together and what metals to use. So the podcast, yeah, came about from that. And also, even if you're a carpenter, even if you're a dental hygienist, guess what? You're using science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so that's kind of the point of the show. I called it Blue Collar White Coat because I wanted to emphasize the fact that there is blue collar work that helps science happen. Wildland firefighters. Again, these folks, machinists and stuff that put together the rocket ship that's, a few doors down from you. And let's think, divers that go underwater and weld on ships, on naval ships or research vessels. Like there's all these jobs that just don't get the highlight, the spotlight that without science can't happen. We can't have what we have today. And then the white coat side is, yeah, some scientists wear a white coat. Like, sure, if you work really hard and you go to school, you get that white coat. But not everybody that wears a white coat is a snob. Not everybody that wears a white coat went to MIT because mommy and daddy went to MIT. They got there through hard work. Maybe they're the kid of immigrants. Maybe they worked through school. Maybe they dropped out because they weren't good at it and they came back later. And there are tons of jobs in science that don't involve a white coat too. So that was kind of the influence behind the name and the first season. I'm in the middle of it right now. I have a bunch of interviews still in the tank that I have to edit and get out, but it's a lot. It's heavily on the communication side because I asked obviously friends and people that I know to come and talk, but we talked to a shark scientist, right, that goes out and does actual shark science, but his thing is communications and talking to the fishermen and talking to the folks whose lives depend on these uh, animals to be healthy. We're talking to underwater oceanographers. I'm talking to my friend from the FDA who was a press officer. I have a machinist who works at a major university doing all kinds of incredible stuff, helping their material science program, their engineering program. So it's just crazy. Like you can almost talk to anybody because ultimately there's STEM involved in how to deliver air gas in a truck. You need to know how to make that safe, right? Or being a teacher, being a science teacher. So it started from that. I'm really excited. And I hope that like your podcast, it helps people realize like people are just people. And most of the time, 99.9% of the time, if they're in the sciences or STEM, they are doing it because they want to help. They want to make the world a better place. They want to get people that need it cancer treatment that's affordable. They want to make sure scientists are represented in a good way in the media. So it's my definitely my like again relentless optimism out there, but I'm hoping that we reach people that are not already looking for science content so that they can see themselves in the show.
Very cool. So blue collar white coats, the name of it. I'm definitely going to check it out. Um, so final question for you today. So what's something about science communication about that career field that might shock people who think that it's just making science simple, whether it's about politics, personalities, the behind the scenes realities of saving literacy in America? What do you got for us to wrap us up in a bow?
My gosh, I have to pick one thing. There's so many things. I think the biggest thing is I think it's that the smartest person that or the smartest person you might see on TV, whether it's you know, Fauci himself or a NASA scientist or whatever, everybody that I've ever met that is in the sciences is someone who can also fall victim to imposter syndrome. You don't think that, you think like, oh, these people like they're geniuses. They're super geniuses, right? Like Tony Stark or something in Marvel. And they know everything and they're probably jerks. They're probably looking down their nose at the rest of us. No, they are nervous to be on camera. They are memorizing their responses to my questions so that they don't sound silly. They are unsure of what to wear on camera. They are just as much talking themselves out of doing speaking appointments and presenting because they don't think they're qualified, even with the PhD behind their name, even with the white coat. Um, and that again, every time I've talked to one of these folks, and I've talked to people that helped launch the Parker Solar Probe, not just launch it but design it. I've talked to people that, again, working on the world's fastest supercomputer, most powerful supercomputer every day. I have talked to people that are trying to find new ways to filter seawater because there's a freshwater, shortage that we're not dealing with. Every single one of these people has a story about why they're in their field, and every single one of them is in it for the right reasons, and that is to help people to, save the world if you'd like it to study new and amazing things for future generations. And I hope that's one thing that can come through no matter what. And science communicators, we get to know these people intimately, and we're not we're not spin doctors. We're here to make sure that what they talk about is something that you can understand and apply to your real life, and see how it affects you and what your tax dollars are going to, for instance, or how it's going to make the world a better place for your kids, for your grandkids. So that's it. I think that's my answer.
That's a great answer. Amy, I appreciate it. And I'm glad you came on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to hear this episode. And yeah, I will definitely be talking to you soon too.
All right. I'll talk to you later. And that was Amy Weldon, a science communication writer. Amy is definitely coming back on as a dolphin trainer. I think it's going to be really interesting to hear how that works. And please, if you like this content, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and right down below, leave a comment and let us know what you think.